An unexpected delivery. Rosalie Benet balanced 3 coffee cups in one hand while struggling with the gallery door. Her paint-splattered canvas bag hung from her shoulder, evidence of the early morning art session she had squeezed in before her shift. At 24, she had mastered the art of juggling multiple jobs. Though mastering actual art remained just out of reach, the Whitmore Gallery occupied prime real estate in Manhattan's Chelsea district, a world away from the tiny studio apartment Rosalie shared with her best friend Paulina in Brooklyn. Working here paid the bills, but it also served as a constant reminder of the gap between her dreams and reality. Every day, she watched wealthy collectors purchase paintings for amounts that could fund her art supplies for a decade. Her boss, Gerald Whitmore, barely glanced up from his desk when she entered. "You're late." "Traffic on the subway," Rosalie replied, setting his coffee down carefully. "The L train was delayed again. There's a package that needs to be delivered uptown. The courier service messed up the address. It's supposed to go to the Blake penthouse on 5th Avenue. Gerald waved dismissively toward a small wrapped box on the corner of his desk. "The client is very important, so don't mess this up." Rosalie picked up the package, noting the elegant wrapping and the weight of something valuable inside. Blake, as in Harrison Blake, the tech guy, the very same. "His mother is one of our most valued clients. She commissioned a custom piece, and the artist just finished it. Take it directly to the penthouse and get a signature." Gerald returned his attention to his computer screen. The conversation clearly over an hour later. Rosalie stood in the lobby of one of Manhattan's most exclusive residential towers. Feeling distinctly out of place in her thrift store coat and worn sneakers, the doorman had eyed her suspiciously before finally calling up to confirm her delivery. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse, foyer that probably cost more than Rosalie would earn in her lifetime. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and floor 2 ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of Central Park. "You're late," a sharp voice called out. Rosalie turned to find an elegant woman in her 50s striding toward her, wearing a designer suit and an expression of severe disapproval. Her silver hair was pulled back in a flawless chignon, and her critical gaze swept over Rosalie from head to toe. "I'm sorry, I came as quickly as I could. I have a delivery from Whitmore Gallery." Rosalie held out the package. The woman ignored it completely. "Where's your garment bag?" The stylist sent over 3 options. "We need to start immediately. The photographer arrives in 20 minutes. Think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just here to deliver this package to Mrs. Blake. I am Diane Blake." The woman grabbed Rosalie's arm, pulling her deeper into the penthouse. "And you're late for the fitting. My son's PR team assured me they'd send someone professional, but I suppose this is what happens when you hire through agencies." Before Rosalie could protest, she found herself in a massive bedroom where several racks of wedding gowns dominated the space. A makeup artist and hairstylist were setting up their stations, while a photographer adjusted lighting equipment near the windows.
Wait.
"I think you have me confused with someone else," Rosalie tried again. "The model for the wedding shoot." "Don't tell me the agency sent the wrong girl." Diane's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I'm not a model. I work at an art gallery. I just came to deliver a package." Diane checked her watch with growing irritation. "This is unacceptable. The photographer is charging $5,000 an hour, and my son will be here any moment. This is supposed to be a simple PR photo shoot for the business section of Forbes magazine. Nothing elaborate, just some tasteful wedding imagery to show he's settling down and becoming more stable." Rosalie's confusion must have shown on her face because Diane sighed heavily. "The board of directors thinks Harrison needs to present a more mature image for the upcoming merger. A few wedding photos will satisfy the investors and get everyone off his back about his personal life. It's purely business, but I'm not qualified to be in professional photographs," Rosalie protested, even as the makeup artist began steering her toward a chair. "You're female. You're the right general size for the dresses, and you're here. That will have to be good enough." Diane pulled out her phone. "I'll call the agency and have them send over the contracts. In the meantime, you might as well get started. What's your hourly rate?" Rosalie's mind raced. Her checking account had exactly $214 until her next paycheck, and her student loan payment was already overdue. Professional photo shoots, paid models, hundreds or even thousands of dollars. This could solve her immediate financial crisis. 300 an hour, she said, picking a number that seemed reasonable. Diane barely blinked. Fine. My assistant will handle the paperwork. Now please cooperate with the team. We're already behind schedule. The next 30 minutes passed in a whirlwind. The makeup artist transformed Rosalie's face with subtle elegance, while the hairstylist worked magic with her long brown hair, creating an updo that looked effortlessly sophisticated. When they finally zipped her into a stunning ivory gown that fit surprisingly well, Rosalie barely recognized her reflection. The dress was deceptively simple. With clean lines and a fitted silhouette that required no alterations, it made her feel like someone else entirely. Someone who belonged in penthouses and society pages. He's here, Diane announced, checking her phone. Places, everyone. Rosalie, stand by the window. Natural lighting is better for these shots. The elevator chimed, and Rosalie heard footsteps approaching. She turned, just as a man entered the bedroom, and her breath caught. Harrison Blake was even more striking in person than in the business magazine photos Rosalie had glimpsed. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that emphasized his athletic build. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his green eyes held a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. He stopped short when he saw Rosalie, his expression shifting to surprise. Who are you? The model the agency was supposed to send didn't show up, Diane interjected smoothly. This is her replacement. Now please, both of you, we've wasted enough time. Stand together by the window. Harrison's jaw tightened, but he moved to stand beside Rosalie without arguing. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated. He was at least 6 inches taller than her, even in her heels. I'm sorry about this, Rosalie whispered as the photographer began positioning them. Your mother didn't really give me a choice. The corner of Harrison's mouth twitched. She rarely does. I'm Harrison, Rosalie. Closer together, the photographer called out. This is supposed to look romantic, not like strangers at a bus stop. Harrison's hand settled on Rosalie's waist, warm through the thin fabric of the gown. She tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach as he gently turned her to face him. Just look at me, he said quietly. Ignore everyone else. For the next 20 minutes, they moved through various poses while the photographer snapped hundreds of shots. Despite the artificial nature of the situation, Rosalie found herself relaxing into Harrison's presence. He was patient and surprisingly gentle, his hands steady as he guided her through each position. Perfect, the photographer finally declared. These are going to be stunning. Now, let's do the ceremony shots. Rosalie froze. Ceremony shots. Standard wedding imagery, the photographer explained, gesturing to where an assistant was setting up a simple altar arrangement near the windows. Exchange of rings, the kiss, all the traditional moments. Very tasteful, very Forbes approved. Seems excessive for a business article, Harrison muttered. But his mother was already ushering them toward the makeshift altar. What Rosalie didn't notice was the elderly man in a suit standing quietly in the corner. What she didn't know was that Diane Blake had arranged for more than just photographs. And what neither she nor Harrison realized was that the prop officiant was actually a licensed minister. And the papers Diane's assistant had, Rosalie's sign, weren't modeling contracts. As Rosalie repeated the words the photographer suggested for the shots, as Harrison slipped a stunning diamond ring onto her finger for the camera, as their lips met in what was supposed to be a staged kiss, neither of them understood that every moment was being legally documented. The kiss was supposed to be brief and professional, but when Harrison's lips touched hers, something shifted. The connection was electric, unexpected, and definitely not acting. When they pulled apart, both were breathing slightly harder, staring at each other with confusion and something else neither wanted to name. Wonderful, Diane said, her smile cold and satisfied. I think we have everything we need. The morning after, 3 days later, Rosalie was in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, working on a canvas she'd been struggling with for weeks, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway. Is this Rosalie Bennett? A crisp professional voice asked. Yes, This is Jennifer Walsh from Walsh & Associates, legal counsel for Blake Innovations. We need to schedule a meeting regarding your recent marriage to Harrison Blake. Rosalie nearly dropped her paintbrush. My what? Your marriage? The ceremony performed on the 15th. We have several documents that require your signature, including the prenuptial agreement that should have been executed before the wedding. This is highly irregular and we need to resolve it immediately. There was no wedding. It was a photo shoot. For a magazine. A pause. Ms. Bennett, did you sign a marriage license on the 15th? I signed modeling contracts. Another pause, longer this time. I think you should come to our offices. Today, if possible. There's been a significant misunderstanding, and it needs to be corrected before the situation becomes more complicated. 2 hours later, Rosalie sat in a glass-walled conference room in Midtown, watching a team of lawyers shuffle through papers while her world crumbled around her. Harrison sat across from her, looking equally shocked and significantly angrier. How is this even possible? He demanded. Jennifer Walsh, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and in sharp pursuit, laid out several documents. Your mother hired Reverend Patterson, a licensed officiant. She obtained a valid marriage license under both your names. Ms. Bennett signed it, believing it to be a modeling contract. You signed it, believing it to be a photography release. The ceremony was performed, witnessed, and legally documented. As of 3 days ago, you were legally married. Rosalie felt dizzy. But I was just delivering a package. This is insane, Ms. Fraud Harrison corrected coldly. My mother manipulated both of us. Be that as it may, Jennifer continued. The marriage is legal. We can pursue an annulment, but given that several days have passed, and the marriage has been documented with the state, it will take time and create potential PR complications. What kind of complications? Rosalie asked weakly. Harrison answered before the lawyer could. I'm in the middle of negotiating a $15 billion merger. The acquiring company is run by traditional family men who value stability and conventional values. If it comes out that I got married and immediately filed for annulment, it looks impulsive and unstable. But you are getting an annulment, right? Rosalie pressed. Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. That depends on what? On whether you're willing to consider an alternative arrangement. Jennifer cleared her throat. Mr. Blake, perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any offers. No, Harrison said, not taking his eyes off Rosalie. She deserves to hear this directly from me, not filtered through lawyers. Rosalie, I need a wife for approximately 6 months, just until the merger is finalized and the board stops questioning my judgment. In exchange, I'll pay off your student loans, provide you with a living stipend, and fund your art career. You'll have access to studios, materials, gallery connections, everything you need. Rosalie's mouth fell open. You want me to stay married to you? Is what? Some kind of business arrangement? Exactly that. Maintain separate residences, live our own lives, but present a united front at necessary social functions. Think of it as a job, a very well-paid job. This is crazy, Rosalie whispered. Probably Harrison agreed, but it solves both our problems. You get financial stability and career opportunities. I get the board and investors off my back. In 6 months, we quietly divorce. You walk away set for life, and we both move on. Rosalie looked at the lawyers, then back at Harrison. His green eyes were unreadable, his expression carefully neutral. This was a business negotiation to him, nothing more. She thought about her student loans. It's $50,000 hanging over her head like a sword. She thought about her tiny apartment, her struggling art career, the constant stress of making rent. She thought about the electric moment when they'd kissed during the photo shoot. If I agree, she said slowly, I want everything in writing. Clear terms, clear timeline, clear expectations. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Of course. Jennifer will draft a contract covering every detail. I want my own lawyer to review it. Now Harrison smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. Smart, I'll cover the legal fees. Rosalie took a deep breath, knowing she was about to make either the best or worst decision of her life. Then I guess I'm your wife for the next 6 months. Learning the rules, Rosalie signed the contract on a Wednesday afternoon in her lawyer's modest office in Queens. Her attorney, a sharp woman named Beverly Chen, who specialized in entertainment contracts, had spent 3 days reviewing every clause and negotiating additional protections. The final agreement was 47 pages long and covered everything from public appearance requirements to what would happen if either party violated the terms. "This is airtight," Beverly said, sliding the final copy across her desk. "You're protected financially no matter what happens. But Rosalie, are you absolutely sure about this? 6 months is a long time to live a lie." Rosalie thought about the wire transfer confirmation she'd received that morning showing her student loans had been paid in full. She thought about the studio space Harrison had already arranged for her in a converted warehouse in Dumbo. 3 times the size of her current apartment with northern light and exposed brick walls. She thought about the opportunities that would come from being connected to one of New York's most successful entrepreneurs. "I'm sure," she said, signing her name with a flourish. That evening, Harrison sent a car to pick her up from the Brooklyn apartment she still shared with Paulina. Her roommate watched from the window as the black town car pulled up to their building. "This is absolutely insane," Paulina said, for the 100th time since Rosalie had explained the situation. "You married a billionaire by accident, and now you're pretending to be in love with him for money. This is literally the plot of a romance novel." "It's a business arrangement," Rosalie corrected, checking her reflection one last time. Harrison had sent over a stylist with an entire wardrobe of appropriate clothing for the wife of a tech CEO. Tonight, she wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. No romance involved. "Right," Paulina said skeptically. "Keep telling yourself that. I saw those photos from the shoot. The way you two looked at each other didn't look like business to me." Rosalie ignored her friend and headed downstairs. The driver, a polite older man named Robert, held the door open for her. "Good evening, Mrs. Blake. Mr. Blake is waiting for you at the restaurant, Mrs. Blake." The name still felt foreign and slightly ridiculous. Rosalie settled into the leather seat and watched Brooklyn fade away as they crossed into Manhattan. She was heading to dinner at Per Se, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, where Harrison had apparently made it a habit to eat several times a month. Tonight would be their first public appearance as a married couple. The restaurant overlooked Central Park from its perch in the Time Warner Center. As Robert helped her from the car, Rosalie took a steadying breath. She could do this. Rehearsed with the etiquette coach Harrison had hired. Practiced small talk about art and business. Learned which fork to use for which course. She was ready. Harrison was already seated when she arrived, standing politely as the host led her to the table. He wore a navy suit without a tie, looking relaxed and devastatingly handsome in the candlelight. "You look beautiful," he said, and it sounded genuine rather than rehearsed. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." Rosalie sat down, accepting the menu from an attentive waiter. For a few minutes, they focused on ordering, Harrison recommending dishes he knew were exceptional. When they were alone again, he leaned back and studied her with those unsettling green eyes. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Rosalie admitted. "What if I use the wrong fork or say something stupid? And you'll be like every other human being who's ever eaten at a fancy restaurant." Harrison's expression softened. "Rosalie, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be yourself. That's who I married, remember? You didn't marry me. Your mother tricked us both." "Fair point." Harrison picked up his wine glass. "But since we're stuck with each other for 6 months, we might as well try to make it bearable. Tell me something real about yourself. Something not in the background check my lawyers ran." Rosalie raised her eyebrows. "You ran a background check on me?" "Standard procedure for anyone entering into a contract with my company. You're clean, by the way. Not even a parking ticket." He smiled. "But the report didn't tell me anything interesting. So tell me something the investigators missed." Rosalie considered the question while the first course arrived. "I'm afraid of the ocean," she said finally. "Not pools or lakes, just the ocean. When I was 7, a wave knocked me down at the beach, and I couldn't tell which way was up. My dad pulled me out, but I've been terrified of deep water ever since." Harrison nodded slowly. "That must make living in Manhattan easier. Not much ocean in Midtown." What about you? What's something real about Harrison Blake that doesn't show up in Forbes profiles? He was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in his glass. I wanted to be a teacher, he said finally. History, specifically. I loved the way stories from the past could explain the present, but my father died when I was 22, and suddenly I was running a company with 500 employees depending on me. The teaching dream didn't seem practical anymore. Do you regret it? Sometimes. Especially during board meetings. Harrison's smile was wry. But I've built something good. Blake Innovations has created technology that helps people, changes lives. That matters too. They talked through 7 courses, the conversation flowing more naturally than Rosalie had expected. Harrison was funny when he relaxed, with a dry wit that caught her off guard. He asked intelligent questions about her art, actually listening to her answers, rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. By the time dessert arrived, Rosalie had almost forgotten this was supposed to be a performance. There's a couple at the table near the window, Harrison said quietly, not looking in their direction. The man is Gordon Whitfield, one of the investors in the merger. He's been watching us for the past 20 minutes. Reality crashed back. This wasn't a real date. This was business. What do? Rosalie asked. We give him a show. Harrison reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. The gesture looked casual and affectionate, but Rosalie felt electricity shoot up her arm at the contact. Smile at me like I just said something charming. Rosalie smiled, hoping it looked genuine and not terrified. Is this working? Perfectly. Now laugh a little, like I'm the most entertaining man you've ever met. She laughed, and somehow it came out natural because Harrison's expression was so serious while saying ridiculous things. You're enjoying this way too much. Maybe a little. His eyes sparkled with amusement. Whitfield is smiling. I think we convinced him. They finished dessert while maintaining the comfortable intimacy they'd established. When Harrison paid the check and helped her with her coat, his hand rested briefly on her lower back, the touch sending warmth through her, despite knowing it was all pretend. Robert was waiting outside with the car. As they drove through the Manhattan streets, Rosalie watched the lights blur past her window. You did well tonight, Harrison said. Whitfield will report back to the other investors that I'm happily married and stable. That's exactly what we needed. Good, Rosalie said, though something about reducing their evening to a successful business. Transaction left her feeling hollow. Harrison seemed to sense her mood shift. I meant what I said earlier, though, about you being yourself. You were genuinely interesting company tonight. The performance part was just the setting, not the substance. Rosalie looked at him, searching his face for signs of manipulation or empty flattery. She found only sincerity. Thank you, she said quietly. You weren't bad company yourself. The first cracks over the next 3 weeks, Rosalie settled into her new reality. Her days were split between working in the beautiful studio Harrison had provided and attending social functions as his wife. There were charity galas where she wore designer gowns and made small talk with Manhattan's elite. Business dinners where she smiled politely while men discussed mergers and acquisitions. Gallery openings where she was introduced as Harrison Blake's new wife. And people suddenly became very interested in her art. The attention was overwhelming and often uncomfortable. Photographers followed them on the street. Gossip columns speculated about their whirlwind romance. Social media dissected her every outfit and public appearance. Rosalie had gone from anonymous, struggling artist to one of the most photographed women in New York practically overnight. Through it all, Harrison was patient and protective. He deflected invasive questions, positioned himself between her and aggressive photographers, and made sure she was never left alone at events where she might be uncomfortable. They developed an easy rhythm, a partnership that felt increasingly natural, but they maintained careful boundaries. Harrison had a penthouse in Tribeca that Rosalie had visited exactly twice, both times for carefully staged photo opportunities. She kept her Brooklyn apartment, though she'd upgraded to her own place now that she could afford it. They communicated primarily through text messages about schedules and appearances. Their physical contact was limited to what was necessary for public consumption. Holding hands at events, his arm around her waist in photos, Brief kisses for the cameras that never lasted long. Enough to feel dangerous. It was professional. Controlled. Exactly. What they'd agreed to until the night everything changed. Rosalie was working late in her studio, lost in a painting that was finally coming together after weeks of struggle. Her phone buzzed with a text from Harrison at nearly 11 at night. "Are you still awake? Working in the studio. Everything okay?" A pause, then. "Can I come by? I need to talk to someone who isn't a lawyer or board member." 20 minutes later, Harrison appeared at her studio door, looking nothing like the polished CEO she was used to. His hair was messy, his tie was loose, and there was exhaustion in his eyes that went beyond physical tiredness. "Bad day?" Rosalie asked, setting down her paintbrush. "Bad month." Harrison walked to the windows overlooking the East River. "The merger is falling apart. One of the key investors is backing out, and he's taking 3 others with him. My lawyers think we can salvage it, but it's going to be ugly. Sorry. Is there anything I can do to help?" Harrison turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "You've already helped more than you know. The only reason any investors are still on board is because they think I've matured and settled down. Without this marriage, the whole deal would have collapsed weeks ago." Rosalie walked over to stand beside him at the window. The city lights reflected off the dark water below. "That's good, then. We're accomplishing what we set out to do, are we?" Harrison's voice was rough. "Because lately I'm having trouble remembering what's real and what's performance." Rosalie's heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I mean that when I hold your hand at events, I'm not thinking about investors. When I kiss you for photographers, I'm not thinking about the merger. I'm thinking about how much I want to keep kissing you when the cameras stop flashing. Harrison." Rosalie's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I know this wasn't the deal," he continued. "I know we agreed to keep this professional, but I can't stop thinking about you, Rosalie. The way you laugh when something genuinely amuses you, instead of that polite laugh you use at parties. The way you get completely absorbed in your painting and forget the world exists. The way you challenged my mother at that charity lunch last week and didn't back down even though you were terrified." "I wasn't terrified," Rosalie protested weakly. "You were, but you did it anyway. That's the thing about you, Rosalie. You're brave even when you're scared." Harrison took a step closer. "And I'm scared right now. Terrified, actually, because this was supposed to be simple, and nothing about you is simple." Rosalie knew she should step back, should remind him of their contract and boundaries. Instead, she found herself moving closer. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want this to be real. Not in 6 months when the merger is done, but now. I want to actually be your husband, not just play one for the cameras." "We barely know each other," Rosalie said, even as her heart argued otherwise. "I know you're left-handed, but use your right hand for detail work. I know you drink your coffee black in the morning and with cream in the afternoon. I know you bite your bottom lip when you're nervous and scrunch your nose when you're confused. I know you're kind to waiters and rude to people who are rude to them. I know you'd rather stay home and paint than attend the fanciest party in the city." "Those are just details," Rosalie whispered, but her resolve was crumbling. Details are everything. They're the difference between knowing someone and understanding them. Harrison reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I understand you, Rosalie, and I think you understand me too." She did. Somehow, in 3 weeks of careful pretending, they'd let each other pass the walls they'd both erected. She knew that Harrison stayed up late reading history books when he was stressed. She knew he donated anonymously to arts programs in public schools because he'd never forgotten his own dream of teaching. She knew he called his grandmother every Sunday and actually listened to her advice. She knew he was lonely despite being surrounded by people all the time. "This is a terrible idea," Rosalie said. Even as she leaned closer to him, worst, Harrison agreed, his hand sliding to cup her cheek. "We have a contract. You can tear it up. Your mother will have a fit. My mother can deal with it. Do. The investors might not approve of real feelings. They might think it's unstable." Harrison smiled, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. then they don't understand that loving someone is the most stable thing a person can do. Loving someone. The words hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying and wonderful. Say something, Harrison said softly. Please, because I'm standing here telling you I'm falling in love with my fake wife, and I need to know if I'm completely crazy or if you feel it too. Rosalie looked into his eyes and saw vulnerability she'd never seen before. Harrison Blake, the man who commanded boardrooms and built empires, was scared of her answer. You're not crazy, she whispered. Or if you are, then I am too. Because I feel it, Harrison. I've been feeling it for weeks and trying to pretend I wasn't. The kiss was nothing like their staged kisses for cameras. This was real and raw and full of all the feelings they'd been suppressing. Harrison's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, while her hands tangled in his hair. They kissed like people who'd been holding back for too long. It's like drowning people finding air when they finally broke apart. Both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. So what now? Now we figure out how to turn a fake marriage into a real one, Rosalie said, smiling despite the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. That's going to be complicated. Everything about us is complicated, true. Harrison kissed her again, softer this time. But you're worth complicated, Rosalie Blake. For the first time, hearing that name didn't feel strange. It felt right. When truth comes out the next morning, Rosalie woke up in Harrison's Tribeca penthouse for the first time without it being staged for photographers. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and she could hear Harrison in the kitchen making coffee. She stretched in his enormous bed, wearing one of his shirts, and allowed herself to feel happy. Last night had changed everything. After the kiss in her studio, they'd talked for hours about what a real marriage between them might look like. They'd discussed fears and hopes and all the complications that came with trying to build something genuine from a foundation of deception. Then Harrison had brought her home, and they'd stayed up even later, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with their contract. Good morning, wife, Harrison said, appearing in the doorway with 2 coffee mugs. He looked rumpled and relaxed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, more approachable than Rosalie had ever seen him. Good morning, husband. The words felt different now, weighted with actual meaning. They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, sharing breakfast and the newspaper, stealing kisses between bites of toast. It felt like playing house, except this time they both wanted it to be real. But reality intruded shortly after noon when Harrison's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. It's my mother, he said. I should probably take this. Rosalie nodded, watching as he answered. She could hear Diane Blake's sharp voice even from across the room, though she couldn't make out specific words. Harrison's responses were terse and increasingly angry. No, mother, you don't get a say in this anymore. Pause. Because you manipulated both of us into this situation. You don't get to dictate how we handle it. Another pause longer this time. That's not your decision to make. Rosalie is my wife, and she's staying my wife. The real kind, not the arrangement you engineered. When he finally hung up, Harrison looked exhausted. She knows something changed between us. Apparently, one of her society friends saw us last night at a coffee shop near your studio, and we looked too happy for it to be fake. What did she say? That I'm making a mistake. That you're not suitable for our family? That the investors will lose confidence if they discover our marriage started as a fraud. Harrison ran his hand through his hair. The usual objections. Is she right? Rosalie asked quietly. About the investors, I mean? If they find out we started as a business arrangement, will it hurt the merger? I don't know, maybe. Probably. Harrison came to sit beside her on the couch. But I'm tired of making every decision based on what's good for business. For once, I want to choose what's good for me. And what's good for me is you. Yeah. Rosalie took his hand, intertwining their fingers. We need to tell the truth. What? About how we met? About the fake wedding and the contract and everything? We need to tell the truth before someone else does. Rosalie spoke with growing conviction. Your mother knows. Which means other people will figure it out eventually. We need to control the narrative. Harrison shook his head. That could destroy everything. The merger. my reputation, your career. Or it could show that we're honest people who got caught in an unusual situation and found something real in it. Rosalie squeezed his hand. I don't want to spend our marriage worried about being exposed. I want us to start fresh, with no secrets. You realize this could blow up spectacularly? I do. But I'm willing to risk it if you are. Harrison studied her face for a long moment, then slowly smiled. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the craziest. Maybe both. Definitely both. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Okay. We tell the truth. Together. The press conference 3 days later. Rosalie stood backstage at the Blake Innovations headquarters, trying to calm her racing heart. In 5 minutes, she and Harrison would walk onto a small stage and hold a press conference where they would explain the true story of their marriage to a room full of journalists who would gleefully tear them apart. Beverly. Her lawyer had spent 48 hours preparing them for every possible question. Jennifer Walsh and the rest of Harrison's legal team had crafted careful statements that acknowledged the unusual circumstances while emphasizing the genuine relationship that had developed. But no amount of preparation could fully ease Rosalie's terror. We don't have to do this, Harrison said, appearing beside her. He wore a navy suit and looked calm, but Rosalie could see the tension in his shoulders. We can walk away right now. Keep the secret, Rosalie said firmly. We decided truth was more important than easy. I still believe that. Harrison took both her hands in his. Whatever happens out there, whatever they write about us, I want you to know something. These past few weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Not because of the arrangement, but in spite of it. You're real in a way nothing else in my life has been for a long time. I love you, Rosalie said. The words coming easily now that she'd stopped fighting them. I love you too. Harrison kissed her gently. Ready to face the wolves? With you. Always. They walked onto the stage hand in hand. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. Journalists shouted questions before they'd even reached the podium. Harrison held up one hand for silence, and gradually the room quieted. Thank you all for coming, he began. Rosalie and I asked you here today because we want to address some rumors and tell you the true story of our marriage. For the next 10 minutes, they laid it all out. The mistaken identity at the penthouse, Diane's manipulation, the accidental legal marriage, the contract they'd signed, and finally the unexpected love that had grown from such chaotic beginnings. So to be clear, Harrison concluded, our marriage began as a business arrangement, but it became real. The love Rosalie and I share is genuine, and we're committed to building a life together based on honesty and partnership. The room erupted with shouted questions. Rosalie gripped Harrison's hand tighter as they faced the barrage together. Mr. Blake, do the investors in your merger know about this arrangement? They do now, Harrison said calmly. And if they choose to back out because I fell in love with my wife, then they aren't the kind of partners I want anyway. Ms. Bennett, some people will say you married for money. How do you respond? Rosalie stepped forward to the microphone. I won't deny that financial security was part of my original decision to sign the contract. I was drowning in student debt and struggling to survive as an artist. But money doesn't make you fall in love with someone's laugh, or the way they listen when you talk about your dreams, or how safe you feel when they hold your hand. Those feelings can't be bought. They have to be earned, and Harrison earned them. What about your mother, Mr. Blake? Does she approve of this relationship? Harrison's expression hardened slightly. My mother's approval is no longer required for my personal decisions. I'm grateful for everything she's done for our family, but I'm an adult, capable of choosing my own partner. And I choose Rosalie. The questions continued for another 20 minutes before Jennifer Walsh finally called an end to the conference. As they left the stage, Rosalie felt drained, but also strangely liberated. The truth was out. For better or worse, the world now knew their story. Harrison's phone started buzzing almost immediately. Messages and calls from investors, board members, journalists, requesting follow-up interviews. He silenced it and pulled Rosalie into his office, closing the door on the chaos outside. How do you feel? He asked, terrified, relieved, like I might throw up. Rosalie laughed shakily. How about you? Same. also proud. You were incredible out there. Harrison pulled her into his arms, and she relaxed against his chest. Listening to his heartbeat, they stayed like that for several minutes before a knock interrupted them. Jennifer Walsh entered, her expression unreadable. "Well?" Harrison asked. "Initial reactions are mixed," Jennifer said carefully. "Some investors are angry about the deception. Others think the whole story is romantic and humanizing. Social media is going insane, but about 60% of the commentary is positive. The consensus seems to be that you're either incredibly foolish or incredibly brave. Which do you think we are?" Rosalie asked. Jennifer smiled, a real smile that transformed her usually stern face. "Both. But I've always believed the best things in life require a little foolishness and a lot of bravery. For what it's worth, I think you two are genuine. That counts for something." Over the next week, the story dominated headlines. "Tech CEO's accidental wife becomes a real romance," proclaimed one outlet. "From fake wedding to true love, the Blake marriage scandal," declared another. Think pieces debated whether their relationship was genuine or an elaborate PR stunt. Late-night comedians made jokes about fake weddings and real feelings. Through it all, Rosalie and Harrison faced the scrutiny together. They gave one joint interview to a respected journalist where they spoke honestly about their relationship. They ignored the gossip columns and focused on building something real. The merger did fall apart, but not catastrophically. 2 investors pulled out immediately, calling the situation unprofessional. But 3 others increased their stake, saying they respected Harrison's honesty and believed the company was stronger with him at the helm. The final deal was smaller than originally planned, but still significant. Diane Blake did not attend the renegotiation meetings. After the press conference, she'd released a brief statement saying she respected her son's decision and wished the couple well, though everyone knew it was written by publicists rather than from the heart. Harrison tried calling her several times, but she didn't answer. The distance between them hurt, but Harrison told Rosalie he'd rather have authentic love with her than conditional approval from his mother. 6 months. Later, Rosalie stood in a private garden in the Hamptons, wearing a different wedding dress than the one from that chaotic day in Diane's penthouse. This dress was simpler, more her style, with delicate lace and a flowing skirt that moved in the ocean breeze. Paulina stood beside her as maid of honor, adjusting her veil. "Ready for your second first wedding?" Paulina asked with a grin. "More ready than I've ever been for anything," Rosalie replied. This time, the ceremony was real in every sense. 20 close friends and family members gathered as witnesses. No photographers except the one they'd hired. No business associates or investors. Just the people who genuinely cared about them. Harrison's grandmother, an elegant woman in her 80s, had flown in from Florida. She'd been the first family member to embrace Rosalie completely, telling her that anyone who could make Harrison laugh the way she did was perfect for him. As Rosalie walked down the aisle created between rows of white chairs, she saw Harrison waiting at the altar. He wore a gray suit and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. His eyes were bright with emotion. This time, when they exchanged vows, every word was chosen by them. This time, when they exchanged rings, Harrison slipped a simple gold band beside the enormous diamond he'd given her months ago. This time, when the officiant pronounced them married, they kissed as 2 people who've chosen each other freely, fully, and forever. At the reception, in a beautiful tent overlooking the ocean, Rosalie found a moment alone with Harrison on the terrace. "Any regrets?" she asked, leaning against him as they watched the sunset. "Not a single one." "You, just one," Rosalie said. And Harrison tensed slightly until she continued. "I wish I'd known that day I delivered that package what it would lead to. I would have been less scared and more excited." Harrison laughed and spun her to face him. "If you'd known, you probably would have run in the opposite direction." "True, I guess some of the best things in life require a little accidental collision." "Accidental," Harrison repeated thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking about that. My mother orchestrated that whole situation, but she didn't orchestrate us falling in love. She didn't orchestrate late-night conversations, or the way you make me laugh, or how you challenge me to be better. Those things were all us, all real, all chosen. So what you're saying is we should thank your mother." I'm saying we should forgive her eventually. When we're ready? Because even though her methods were manipulative and wrong, the end result was you and me. Harrison cupped her face in his hands. And I wouldn't trade that for anything, even the merger. Especially the merger. Companies come and go. But finding someone who sees you completely, who loves you anyway, who makes you want to be worthy of that love, that's once in a lifetime. Rosalie kissed him as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere inside the tent, someone was giving a toast. Music drifted through the evening air. Their friends and family celebrated the union of two people who'd found love in the most unexpected way. 6 months ago, Rosalie had been a struggling artist, delivering a package to a penthouse. She'd accidentally married a billionaire, signed a contract to pretend to be his wife, and thought she understood exactly what she was getting into. She'd been wrong about all of it. What she'd gotten was so much more than financial, security, or career opportunities. She'd gotten a partner who believed in her art even when she doubted it. A husband who defended her against critics and held her when she cried, and celebrated her victories like they were his own. A love that started as performance, but became the most real thing in her life as they walked back into the tent together. Hand in hand, Rosalie thought about all the accidents and coincidences that had led to this moment. The wrong package delivery, the mistaken identity, the manipulative mother-in-law, the contract that was supposed to keep things simple and professional. Sometimes the best love stories didn't follow any plan. Sometimes they started with chaos and confusion and contracts. Sometimes you had to pretend to be in love before you realized you weren't pretending anymore.